Commercial against residential. At some point in your journey of business, your little mind will start thinking, right, is commercial work better or is residential work better in the construction industry? Now, for me, look, if you're new to the channel, I'm Dean Barton and I have done millions of pounds worth of work in the residential market, from basic extensions and refurbs to really high-end fit-out works. And I've done millions of pounds of work in commercial market of doing toilets, bathrooms, offices, warehouse extensions, quite boring work. So I've got a really good balanced view to answer both. And on this video, I've got 10 key points that you might not have thought about that you might need to consider when you're weighing up your decision whether commercial or residential is the better type of work for you. So, number one, as we crack in, the type of clientele that you're going after. Residential clients are going to be individuals. It's going to be probably the biggest expense they've ever spent in their life. So they're going to be very emotional about the purchase and the whole journey of you doing work for them. So it's a big difference because you're probably likely not going to see this client very often either. You're going to do one build for them, one big project for them. You might go back and do small bits, but generally on the whole, they're not going to be a massive repeat client. Whereas in the commercial world, you're dealing with businesses. And businesses always change, they always adapt, they always need more stuff, they move premises, they expand, they grow, they move, they know other good business owners as well. So highly valuable clients, and they've got the money. This is the key thing. When you think about it, an individual has likely probably remortgaged their home, or they've sold a business, or they've come into money from inheritance, they've got a pot of cash they're going to spend on a project. It's a massive deal to these guys. Whereas when you're working for businesses, some of these businesses are doing hundreds of millions of pounds a year. So to spend 500 grand on an office, it's a commercial decision. It's not a emotional decision. And that's the biggest thing you want to know and get from this, is that how people buy, because these people are buying on emotion. You know, you got to think they're spending a lot of money on their own residence, their own personal house. They're thinking about their kids, their family, their dog, whatever setup they've got. They're making emotional decisions. And that is going to come across as you're running the contract because it's emotionally led. Whereas the business point of view, these guys are purely looking at, we need this space, we need to employ more people, we need to produce more of whatever they do, whatever that business does, and they're looking at it on return on investment. So it's a very different buying criteria. They're business people. You're not going to get away with just, doing things laxy-daisy. You're going to have to get organised and be, a really professional outfit that you're on top of your numbers, you're on top of your delivery, because they won't take things taking longer. Very different types of clientele. Then number two, from a marketing point of view, because marketing is a massive part of a business, it's getting clients in, it's getting leads in and inquiries in. From marketing side, you're going to need a lot of leads when you're dealing with residential. Unless you are doing massive projects or building one-off homes and you only need 3 or 4 or 5 of those a year because you're doing a big project as you go to get your revenue. But if you're doing smaller jobs at 20, 30, 50 grand, even 100 grand, you're going to need a lot more leads to actually give you enough work to get decent revenue. And I'm talking doing multi-millions. If you're in business and you've not got your eyes set on doing multi-millions, I don't know what you're doing. Because in this industry, you need to do a lot of revenue. It's not like other industries where you can do a lot less revenue because the margins are a lot higher. The margins are they're okay, but they're not massive. You've got to be doing decent revenue. So if you're doing a multi-million pound a year business, you're going to need a lot of leads. You're going to need a marketing system. Whereas in commercial, you're probably only going to need 2 or 3 clients. And this is the reality of it. You can have 2 or 3 clients, each one of those clients giving you a couple of £1 million a year each. So it's very different, and the relationships are a lot more valuable on this side, because once you've got those relationships, like I say, business relationships are going to keep coming back. Whereas on this side, 2 or 3 clients, one-time sale, and that's it, you're done. And you're likely going to need 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 clients a year to give you the type of revenue that you want. So it's a different machine, it's a different business. Although they're just doing the same thing, you're both doing building, you already start seeing a different business models, and you have to have different skills within each different category to grow a decent business. Next, sales. Sales in construction is, let's be honest, it's not a hard sale. Generally, if you've been recommended to someone and you look the part, you look good and people like you, You're not really going on a hard sale journey. Once you're in there, and as long as you're professional, you deliver a quote and your price is good, you're going to pretty much win the job. And a lot of the times in residential, people only get one cost. As long as you turn up and you look good, they don't bother getting other costs. So sales is, for me, it's pretty easy in residential. It's pretty easy. Unless you're turning up like a mess, you're late, you don't do what you say you're going to do, and you just can't talk about what you're doing properly, then you shouldn't even be in business anyway. But if you're good, and I imagine you guys watching this, you've got a level of comprehension, you turn up on time, you look the part, you know what you're talking about because you've done a lot of it. Sales is quite easy. You haven't really got to force people into doing it because they want the job done. That's why they've got you around their house. Whereas in the commercial world, you're not selling a person, you're selling a business. So the sales is actually a bit harder because you've got to satisfy a lot of people to be given a job in this world. You've got to satisfy probably the PM initially. The PM's probably got you in to quote the job or look at the job from the client side, but you've got to satisfy the financial team. They are going to credit check you. They are going to check you out on company's house. They are going to go through everything about your company because they're managing risk. They don't want to choose a contractor that's going to go bust on them and you're halfway through fitting out a warehouse or an office project. And where does that leave them as a business? They're absolutely screwed. They can't have that happen. So their buying criteria is slightly different to a residential client. So you've got to sell people the financial team, you've got to sell maybe a procurement team on why to use you and why they should, because they're going to be looking at things like how you deal with waste, how you deal with environmentally friendly policies and all sorts of stuff. So it's a different sale whatsoever, and getting on the PSL sometimes is actually the hardest part of getting into this world. But it's a different type of sale, so you've got to be built for that different type of sale. Then, contracts. Residential world, a lot of the times, don't exist. A lot of projects in residential, there is no contract. If you're building a one-off house, someone might have got a QS involved or an architect involved and they're running the contract, and you will have maybe a JCT or an NEC3, but maybe it's not a given. Whereas commercial world, pretty much contract city. These guys will not take excuses, they will not take delays, they will not take you messing up your costs and price and not delivering when you say you will, because they're running a business. So there will be heavy penalties within the contract to say, well, if you don't deliver by this date on the project you said you would, there will be charges. You can get a bit of this as well in residential, like say if you've got an architect switched on running a good contract, you will get hit with stuff like that. But you've got to be aware that this is, commercial work is a lot more commercial by definition of the name as well, by being run commercially. It's a business transaction. Like I said, this is an emotional transaction. A lot of residential end users don't really understand what contracts are even available or even use them. They just get a builder in, get Sparky in, get a plumber in, give us a price, off you go. Whereas this stuff is all going to be reviewed massively as well. Your costs are going to be reviewed, your quote is going to be reviewed, all of the terms, everything, they're going to go through stuff a lot more thorough from a commercial point of view and from a contract point of view. Then, labour, getting staff. Now for me, residential is actually more difficult. It's more difficult because of just the nature of the works that you're doing. There's a lot of it is a lot more bitty. There is a lot more going on. You've got plasterers in at the same time as carpenters. You've got sparkies on at the same time. People get in the way. You're trying to deliver the job as quick as you can. Finishes is the most important thing in residential. If you're doing a decent project on a home, that finish quality is so important because someone's living there and they're going to have all their little quirks and design tastes, particular wallpapers, finishes, materials, whatever it's going to be, because it's their home. It's very, very hard to get fixed costs from subcontractors for labour, because if they can't get into the room because there's 3 other people in there, there's just not enough space. A bit more difficult to run, so you're literally probably going to be running most of your labour on day rates, people that you use over and over again, and if the job takes 3 or 4 days longer, you're paying that labour rate because you've got to finish the job. So it's very different to run versus commercially. A lot of it, you're going to be doing subcontractor packages. which is a dream to run. Like, it's amazing because when you subcontract, you've got fixed costs. You can literally, and this is what we did a lot of, we would get a fixed cost from a ground worker, a fixed cost from a steel worker, a fixed cost from a cladding contractor, a fixed dry lining, petitioning, plastering contractor, electrical, plumbing, all nice little packages. So you know exactly where the job is. If the job's costing you 100 grand, let's say, for ease, and you've got costs of 80 grand against that from all different contractors, you literally give an order to all those contractors, you sign those up to your contract and say, right, you've got to deliver in this time frame, these are the terms of the agreement, blah, 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 this is the spec, so it's all matched, it's all organised, it's nice to run, it's a dream. But are there crossovers? Of course there are. You can do good subcontract packages in residential, depends on the job that you're doing. Most people, if you're doing things like an extension, you can pretty much sub out the brickwork or the groundworks, but it's all the other little bits, the carpentry, the plumbing, the sparkies, it all gets a little bit muddled up because of just time and running the program. But for me, that is a massive plus of the commercial world, and the more that you can do that in the residential world of subbing out packages as complete fixed price to do the package, such an easier business to run. Then payments, the most important thing. I've found that getting payments out of residential is easier and quicker, because generally you can put invoices in, and if you're on a job, you're on a contract, you're on a site, people will keep paying because they want to keep you on their site. They're worried that you're not going to carry on doing the work, and you'll get paid a lot quicker. Whereas commercially, you are abiding by their terms, the client's terms, which means you could be waiting, very typical, 60, 90, but it can even be 120 days that you're waiting for your money. So you can put an invoice in on the 1st of March, not get paid until, when is that going to be? End of March, April, May, June, end of June, August time to get paid in the very worst case. And that's assuming that your payment applications in line with the contract are in order and you've done those properly. If not, they can reject your invoice and your application for payment, and that'll again get pushed back another 30 days, and then you're waiting 120 days from approval of the invoice. And this is the big thing with commercial, is that you need big pockets to run it. You need cash flow to run it. So if you haven't got a lot of cash, you've got to be very careful with the clients that you are working for. There are some out there that will pay you quicker, but I'm just giving you a fair balanced view that you need a lot of cash flow, a lot of working capital to roll the jobs. Because the other thing is, what you don't realise, linking into like the commercial side of it, is that things like payment terms and retentions, and you will get retentions on jobs in the residential market, and let's say it's 2.5% of a job. So if you do a 100 grand job, 2.5 grand of that can be held back for a year, 12 months. 2.5% is pretty normal, but if you're doing big commercial jobs, and let's say you've done £1 million job, that's a 25 grand that they're keeping as retention. And if you don't deliver on something else, another project for them down the line, they might use that retention against you and actually use that money in. So you've got to think about it. On that £1 million a year job, let's just say you have got 100 grand net profit at the very bottom of that, and you're doing very well to end up with that in the commercial world. You've got 10% net, absolute clean profit on a £1 million job, that's 100 grand. 25k of that is going to be held back by the client. So that's a quarter of your profit is going to be held back for a year. So again, links into my argument that you need cash, because actually a lot of your profit is going to be held up by the commercial client. And if you cock up, they'll do anything to get rid of that retention. If anything goes wrong on that job, if let's say the plumbing goes wrong and a water leak happens and they have to spend 10 grand to rectify the problem, or the electrics go, they can eat into this retention and use it basically, and that's why they do it. So you've got to be aware of this, that from a commercial side, in residential, it's not really like that. People would typically just pay you. They want to just get the work done and get you paid. They're not thinking commercially, whereas businesses, again, they think more commercially. Then, the fun factor. Now for me, personally, residential is nice. It's the sexy stuff. You know, especially if you're working on really expensive, lavish homes, there's a lot of fun out of that. There's a lot of satisfaction because you're delivering a fantastically nice product. So I actually think this is quite a nice place to be in residential. Whereas commercial, a lot of it, it's going to be quite boring. You're not going to have a great deal of fun. And I've done both. So I've done some really nice high-end fit-out stuff, luxury, and luxury again. Really nice stuff where you're doing really expensive joinery packages, really expensive decorating packages, which you wouldn't believe what you can spend on decorating in a really nice luxury place, especially somewhere like Mayfair in central London. It's nice, it's good to look at, it's exciting because you're making a nice product and it's heavily like design led and it's cool, nice to work on. Whereas this stuff, the commercial world, a lot of it is the same shit over and over again. And the amount of money that we did just on very boring stuff, office fit outs, carpet tiles, partition walls, plain white, prisons, cell blocks, you know, do 50 cell blocks, redecorate them, refurb them, put new doors on. It's nothing nice, it's nothing sexy, it's not exciting, but you can get volume at it. And that sometimes is the big debate of going, okay, well, we could have fun and we can do nice stuff, or we can make money and just do boring work over and over again and keep churning and keep churning. And that's just the debate that you've got to have for yourself and what type of work you actually want to do. Next, the ball ache factor. Well, for me, there is a different ball ache in each one. And the biggest ball ache in residential is the customer. No disrespect to the customers, but they change their minds all the time. They don't understand what they're doing. They've never done this type of stuff before. You explain to them why systems won't work, why designs won't work. They want it. Then they realise it is expensive. Then they realise it didn't work and they should have listened to you at the beginning. They don't understand that things take time. They want to squeeze you all the time from a 16-week project. They want it in 12 weeks. All sorts of stuff. You put in for variations and they go, well, why is that an extra? You should have known. Whereas we all know when you're in this industry, you start a project, things change. Stuff happens on site. Things weren't allowed for that you couldn't have possibly known of. It can become a bit of a bum fight between these clients. So it is a bit more of a ball ache. And then when things go wrong, they get the biggest hump whatsoever over the smallest stuff because some electronic isn't working or the fan doesn't turn on in the bathroom and they're phoning you on a Sunday night when you're with your family and they're going, my fan doesn't work in the bathroom, can you come round now? And you're like, okay, great, what am I going to do? It can be a lot more of a ball ache to run. But commercially, to be honest, can't really think of much ball aches. I mean, sometimes they move the goalposts, sometimes they spring jobs on you last minute and go, can you start next week? But if you're earning good money and there's a lot of money to be made and there's a lot of work they can give you, it's what I don't really see that as a ball ache. I see that as a positive. I think there's a lot less ball ache in commercial, but again, that's because it's not as exciting. Whereas when you're doing stuff that's different all the time, it is going to be more of a ball ache. Whereas I don't really see much of a ball ache in commercial. So I'd actually give that a low ball ache rating. And obviously, look, if you're new to me, I just say how it is. Low ball ache, we all understand what I'm talking about. Then next, one thing that you probably haven't thought about is risk. How much risk are you willing to take in a company? And there is a lot of risk on both sides because actually construction, building, any trade business, there's a lot of risk to it. Ultimately, you're building stuff on site. You're taking a risk from a health and safety point of view, but I'm talking risk on this video purely from a business point of view. Your biggest risk in the residential world is that a client doesn't pay you. That's really as bad as it can get because if you're exposed to hundreds of thousands of pounds and a client doesn't pay you, because people do run out of money. And believe it or not, there are people out there that are just bad people and they deliberately take on jobs knowing they can't pay people. And you get stung. That's the exception, not the rule. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. It is there. It's a thing in the marketplace. You probably know someone yourself who's been stung. You might have been stung yourself in the past. I'm very lucky that's never happened. And I think that's because I've always been a very good judge of character. When I meet a client, I'm very good at saying, is this a good client or is this going to be a problem? And that's probably one thing you want to get from this video, is that if you meet a client and you get the feeling something doesn't add up here, or I don't get a good feeling from this client, I think something's a bit untoward, walk away from the job, because there's always another job. But if you take on that bad job and you take that risk and you go under, you're probably not going to survive that. You're probably going to have to go bankrupt, roll the company down, not pay suppliers, not pay lads that you know. and it's lads that you've probably known for a long time, which is absolutely the worst thing in this industry. So be very careful what you take on. Other than that, it's just the risk really is then in doing the job and choosing people that you know that can deliver good labour, that are going to do a high quality job, which links back to that difficulty of labour. But other than that, that's really as bad as it gets from that point of view. From commercial, there is still a chance they might not pay you, but you've really got to be in a really bad position where a massive company suddenly goes under and goes to liquidators. But if you're doing work for companies that are doing multi-millions of pounds and been around for a long time, that's going to be very, very rare. But the risk is, with commercial, if you don't do what you say you're going to do with a contract and you don't deliver on time, you don't deliver on budget, these guys will screw you because they got more money than you. They've got millions in the bank. They've got a whole financial team. They've got a whole legal team. They've probably got offices all over the world, and they're going up against you, who's just probably a guy with 2 or 3 people in an office and 15, 20 lads or whatever you've got. You do not stand a chance against these guys. So you cannot fail on this stuff. You have to deliver what you say, because if you don't, that's the worst case, but they'll never use you again and you're burnt. So it's that argument again of, well, you need less clients, but if you lose those clients, you can lose your revenue very, very quickly. And this is the problem, and this is the big risk that people don't actually see, is if you're working for 2 or 3 commercial clients and you're doing a couple of £1 million for each client, if you lose one of those clients, you lose 30% of your revenue overnight. Like, it's literally just gone. And you might have built the infrastructure, the staff and everything else, vans, the lot, to be able to handle that amount of revenue, and it shrinks by 30%, you've got to let people go. And that's not a nice place to be in. So you're actually going back to risk. What you want to do in this world is make sure you're not overly spread, that one client doesn't have more than 20% of your total revenue. That is probably the best thing you'll get from this video. Little bonus, I didn't even think about saying that. But if you're over 20% per client, you're at risk, because if they disappear, you've got to catch that revenue back up. Whereas in this world, there's always another residential client out there, there's always another job. It's easy to go and get your name out there, go and speak to more people, win some more work. But that is the main points to really think about when you're deciding between the two. And what I would say is pick one, because they're 2 different businesses. One is built in a very particular way. Your office staff, your lads on site, you're going to have people that are very good with residential clients and residential projects. Whereas in commercial, it's completely different. You're going to need more of a commercial team in the office, more heavily on the estimation side of the office, the administration of contracts. The lads have got to understand the health and safety a bit more and how the clients work, that you can't just pop back tomorrow when you feel like it. It's got to be done now. They're 2 different businesses, and the problems that we always had is that when we were trying to be both, it always caused a shower of shit because you don't have the infrastructure to deliver it. Be very good at one. You can do multi-millions at one. You don't need to do both. And I think a lot of people look at it as a shiny penny. You get to a stage in either one of these and you go, actually, residential work looks a bit better. Or actually, commercial work looks a bit better. But look, the shiny penny doesn't exist. If the grass looks green on the other side, it's usually because there's more shit on the other side and the ground is more fertilised. And that's just how it is. Stick to one and build a team in one that you want to go with and just run with it, and you can build into multi-millions and have a fantastic business. Now, if you're asking me what would I like to do, what would I prefer to do, knowing what I know now, it's a tough one. And I think really on the balance, if it was my heart only, I'd say residential, because I just love the project. I love the end result. I like building nice stuff. That's why I got into the industry, because I enjoy building nice stuff. My heart would say this side of the coin, but actually my head would say commercial work, because of just basically you get scalability, the money side of the business, and actually just building a decent solid company, which in the end is going to be a lot easier to sell at the end if it's a commercial business as well, because it's got commercial value to it. If you've got contracts with certain clientele, there's a big value to that. So my brain and my head would say more commercial work. But make the decision yourself. It's completely up to you and where you want to be, and it all comes down to what goals you want for your business. So that's it for this video, guys. If you haven't checked out already, I've got a free podcast. It's in a link below this video. It covers all the topics on the business. It's straight, it's raw. I say exactly how it is. You can listen to it on the go, in the van or in the car or in the office. Check it out, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.